There are 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Acceptance is a difficult thing. Quake IV sucks. Look, kids, before you light the comment section on fire, just hear me out. I had a whole clever opening bit I was going to do with this video talking about this game, the past, etc, etc. You know, I thought I could be clever, but after playing through this game twice just to be sure I had the feelings I had for this topic, I'm just going to come out and say straight up before we even think about deep diving here. Quake IV sucks. It sucks as a Quake game, and it sucks as a first-person shooter. And after 16 years of actually trying to play this game to completion, to have it all come down to this is just depressing and insulting, and I don't really know how to accept that. I've gone through a plethora of feelings while writing this script. I started out angry, and then I got oddly fixated on analyzing the game, and then I kind of found it all endearing before swinging all the way back around to angry again. Alien Resurrection is a similar case for me. Alien Resurrection is a film from 1997 that stars Sigourney Weaver and Winona Ryder, directed by French auteur Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and written by American quipster Joss Whedon. Now on paper, the combination of all this talent sounds like it would make for a wild, weird, or at least an interesting film. A story about Ellen Ripley's clone being used to resurrect the xenomorph species is exactly the kind of Whedon-esque nonsense that sells spec scripts. Jeunet, at the time known for his films Delicatessen and the City of Lost Children, seemed perfect to sit in the chair for this story, conjuring dreamy, fantastical, dread-laden visuals. Unfortunately, as history would have it, Jeunet didn't quite get Whedon's whip-sharp script and quirky characters, so Jeunet shuffled around entire scenes in a way that he would felt better suit the film he was trying to make. And while Resurrection is arguably a beautiful film to look at, the reshuffled script makes no damn sense. The weird, fantastical aspects of Jeunet's style fall completely flat, and overall, the fourth film's meandering spirit and pace failed. It's widely regarded as the worst film in the original Alien series. Critics and audiences alike just couldn't accept it. Now, I don't hate that movie necessarily. It's a different kind of Alien flick. It does weird shit that doesn't work most of the time, but it's different and weird. And I like where it was trying to go, but I don't like how it did it. So I've spent a lot more time analyzing the flick for where it went wrong rather than outright hating on it. And in making the comparison here of Quake IV to Alien Resurrection, I found myself not quite outright hating this game or being fully angry at it, but more curious, analytical, which also then leads back into being pissed off as it pulls some bullshit again. Rather than develop the game in-house themselves, id Software enlisted Raven Software to develop Quake IV, and it was originally published in 2005 by Activision. Picking Raven for the job was a no-brainer, as Raven had worked closely with id multiple times over the years and were arguably the studio most familiar with John Carmack's game engines, even more so than the team at id. The game was announced at QuakeCon in 2001 while id was still working on Doom 3. Both games were developed in tandem with each other, as the plan was for Raven to use the id Tech 4 engine for the new Quake, even as id was still putting the finishing touches on the engine while developing Doom 3. Thing is, the Raven software in 2005 wasn't the same Raven software that had developed the Heretic and Hexen games. When Activision acquired Raven back in 1997, a number of devs decided to jump ship and form their own independent studio, Human Head, so they wouldn't be beholden to the corporate giant. In hindsight, this was a good decision. The hype surrounding Quake IV was over the fucking moon. Rather than craft another unique entry into a series that had already defined itself through diversity, Raven chose to go back to the Strogg War storyline from Quake II, picking up immediately after the events that happened in that game. With id Tech 4 finished and Doom 3 released in 2004, Raven had the tools, they had the talent, and they had the means to deliver in 2005 what by all rights was going to be a balls-to-the-wall sci-fi war shooter using id's latest and greatest technology. Much like Alien Resurrection, it didn't go over so well. I was so fucking ready for Quake IV the moment it was announced. I'd skipped Doom 3 because, to be honest, the way id Tech 4 renders graphics has always looked off to me. Not like Uncanny Valley off, but like Carmack's reach had finally exceeded his grasp, and while he'd successfully crafted an engine that had gorgeous, realistic lighting effects, it made everything look shiny and fleshy, and no matter what kind of game you made with that engine, it would look like weird body horror shit. Which it did. But I digress. I'd skipped Doom 3, but I was a Quake slut ride or die. And after only having multiplayer for Quake 3, the promise of a new campaign? Shit, a new campaign that picked up after Quake 2? I was all over that. So I did some research and spent some money on a brand new PC and purchased everything I needed to play Quake IV. So when the desktop and the game arrived a couple of days after release, I popped in the CD-ROM and installed the game and started playing, and all the graphics were green. I deduced that I'd fucked up the settings somehow, so I tried everything to figure out a way to fix it, only to finally land on the realization that I had somehow bought the wrong graphics card. So while the one I purchased was technically compatible, it wasn't compatible enough and couldn't render color in the game. And since I'd already spent a bunch of money building this PC, I couldn't justify spending any more to get the correct graphics card. So while I tried to struggle through and play it anyway, I just couldn't do it. So I gave my copy of the game to my brothers. To say that I was unhappy was an understatement. I felt defeated. Just fucking defeated. Quake was my series. Still is my series. Not having a way to play the game because I'd made a mistake was devastating. But well, I had a bunch of things going on at that point in time, like a divorce, and I didn't have much room to think too much about it. In fact, it wouldn't be until 4 years later where, after upgrading my rig, I decided to buy the game on Steam so that I could finally play the Quake game that had gotten away. And to my surprise, it was absolutely, unbelievably boring. I got up to the tank bit in the game and threw my hands in the air and noped out. It was just so fucking boring and slow and awful to play. I was doubly devastated now. It felt like the worst kind of loss, like loss after the fact of loss. A kind of grief you get when you're remembering a loved one that left behind a dark secret that changes the way you view them after the fact. I gave the game another shot in 2015, thinking I ought to just plow through it and beat it just so I could say that I beat it, but I just gave up on it pretty quickly. I resigned myself to the notion that I would just never see the end of that game. I already knew the twists, how the game worked, I knew most of the stuff enough about it for me to know that it was probably fine that I didn't actually play it. And then I started running this channel, and then I started doing videos on Quake, and then I realized I was probably going to have to make a video on Quake IV. Fuck! I really walked into this one with a preconceived notion of what this experience would be like, kids. After not one, not two, but 3 attempts at this game over the past 16 years, I've certainly formed an opinion or two. But, as I have learned during my time running this channel, preconceived notions can only lead to disappointing game experiences no matter what. Best way to experience a game is to walk in as open-minded as possible and let the chips fall where they may. With that in mind, I bravely downloaded Quake IV, strapped myself in, and booted up the game. And then promptly remembered that this game hates Windows 10. There's a quick fix you can do to get high resolution and ultra graphics settings working really well for Quake IV, which I highly recommend because if you don't, then this game is going to look muddy as fuck on modern systems. You can apply this in the form of a config file that makes this game run as smoothly as a fully optimized Doom Eternal. I found it through a YouTube help video, and should you find yourself wanting to play this game, I'm linking it in the description below so that you too can get out there and actually enjoy the visuals. As it turns out, there's actually some neat sights to see here, like the opening cinematic. I will say this, the game does not fuck around in certain places. This is foreboding as fuck. A field of space debris, pieces of dead bodies, the ominous factor here is through the roof. We start the game off with a military operation well underway. With the defeat of the Macron over in Quake II, the Earth militia forces have authorized a full-scale invasion of Strogos, the home planet of the Strog, which is pronounced both Strog and Strogue at various points by various characters in the game here, so I'm not going to be picky about how to pronounce it during this video. Needless to say, we're cast in the role of Corporal Matthew Kane of Rhino Squad, who is
one certified badass.
A man like Kane could get us killed. Shut the hell up, Strauss.
And has a bit of an air of mystery and reverence thrown about him, as he was apparently part of a squad that helped successfully push back the Strog invasion of Earth. As such, Kane's new squad mates in Rhino look at him with a mixture of awe and disappointment. Between the number of Marines who are constantly patting Kane on the back and those who are yelling at him for moving too slow, Kane immediately has a lot to live up to as a badass motherfucker who can hold his own. Of course, in true "we're invading an alien planet" fashion, Rhino Squad's dropship gets hit on the way down, causing it to crash, and as Kane picks himself up out of the rubble, the game begins. I gotta say right off the bat, the visuals are actually a lot more impressive than I remembered they were. The Strog designs feel really good, something like H.R. Giger meets space cyber Nazis, even if they look nothing like the Strog from Quake II. You've got Fodder Strog, Grenade Strog, Melee Electric Shock Strog, The Railgun Strogg is a pretty neat design. He has a shield to protect himself with that he drops to fire his shoulder-mounted railgun at you. Gave me a lot of trouble until I came across the lightning gun later on in the game, which can short out his shield and let you get in an extra hit or two. All of the Strogg types are visually distinct from each other and have different audio cues, so even if you don't see them right away, you'll probably hear them and know what you're about to deal with, which is admittedly a very nice touch and gets Raven some points. Alright, let's see here. Let's start moving and get a handle for the controls. Wow, this walk speed is terrible. Let's hit the shift key to run. Oh. Oh, you hold shift to walk. This is the run speed. Christ. Off the jump, problem number one that rears its ugly head is that Kane moves like he's trudging through molasses while wearing ankle weights. It's bad. It's so fucking bad. And while it's a problem that corrects itself later, which we'll get to, this initial movement scheme is just so bad. Moving onwards gives us our first taste of combat. Point, shoot, you know the drill. We're pretty quickly introduced to the basic set of weapons. The blaster pistol, the rifle, the shotgun, and the grenade launcher. The blaster has infinite ammo and is fine for the first 2 minutes of the game before you pick up the rifle, and after that you'll never use it again. One thing I didn't notice until it was no longer relevant as a weapon was that you can charge it for a slightly stronger shot, which is neat and all, but again, it's a pretty useless weapon once you literally find anything else. The rifle is standard issue full-blooded Marine rapid-fire hit-scan rifle goodness. It looks and feels a little too much like the pulse rifle from Aliens, which is simultaneously a good and a bad thing, because it looks cool and feels cool to use, but it's also not nearly as powerful as you think it should be. But it's fine. It has a flashlight mounted on it, so you'll find use for this weapon even into the end game. Another nice thing for this weapon is that if you need to downshift to a reliable hit-scan weapon on the fly, all you have to do is hit the F key for your flashlight and the rifle pops up. Flashlight on, and you're good to go. I turned to this a lot in certain levels when I either needed to hit something from far away, or I didn't want to waste any of my better ammo on fodder. The shotgun is... well, it's fine, you know? I wasn't sure if we'd be getting a Doom 3 shotgun, but the Quake IV shotgun seems to be at odds with itself. On one hand, it fires quickly, handles well, lands powerful shots that will get you out of sticky situations quickly, and in that regard is a good shotgun. But the target reticle is so small that aiming with it feels counterintuitive? Because you'd normally think that the shotgun blasts spread out over distance, but there's zero indication of that here. In fact, I think the choke on this negates any spread at all. You have to be dead on target aiming with it to land any damage. So while the shotgun is a good shotgun in terms of damage output and feel, trying to aim with it is like, what the fuck is this? The grenade launcher is actually pretty good. I got a good arc out of the grenades. It's got a deep, beefy sound to it, fires at a decent rate. Biggest downside is that the explosive blast radius in this game is way too big, like Daikatana levels of big. Speaking of, the melee distance is also stupid. Strogg will be more than an arm's length away and then take a swing at you and still hit Kane. Grenades will explode from what feels like would be a safe distance, and yet Kane takes damage from it. The grenade launcher is absolutely not a close quarters weapon, but when you need to move bodies around, it'll more than handle it. I had a lot of feelings about combat during the course of this game. I'll get into that here in a minute, but first let's talk about the basic gameplay loop provided for us. Move forward, explore an area, discover some kind of plot point that prevents us from moving forward, turn around, go back through the area we've just explored, rinse, repeat. It's a whole lot of repetition back and forth, crisscross through areas you've explored just to re-explore, get ambushed from a different angle, etc. In hindsight, I think the game was attempting to take inspiration from Quake II's hub system, in which you'd run back and forth across separate maps, checking off objective boxes before ultimately returning to a single exit point. Most of the time you're running solo, but sometimes you'll have other Marines with you, meaning extra firepower to help you take out the Stroggs. The thing with that though is, well, most of the time the other Marines are basically invincible. Sometimes they're not, and if they die you fail your mission and you have to start over, which is fun. All of the Marines have names and dialogue, and a lot of them are voiced by Stephen Bloom. My favorite is Strauss, voiced by actor Peter Stormare, who complains all the time about being put into harm's way and how valuable he is, and I love how endearingly slimy Strauss is.
Corporal, I refuse to repair this power transfer until I'm assigned additional protection.
Strauss, we've been over this. It's not
But
gonna
I
happen.
am in mortal danger. This area is filled with Strogg.
Thank you, Private Strauss. Your bravest is noted.
Some of the Marines have specific roles. You've got standard issue grunts, you've got medics, and then you've got techs. Medics and techs are absolutely boss to have around, and you should take advantage of them when they are, because if your health or armor are running low, you can walk up to them outside of combat and they'll refill your stats. Fucking bless. As mentioned before, sometimes they can die, and sometimes them dying is a fail state, but for the most part they exist as support and as scripted necessities as part of the gameplay loop. Quake IV's gameplay loop is excessively dependent on cinematic triggers and scripted events, so much so that the sense of immersion is quickly neutered by the overwhelming feeling of running through an amusement park ride. Think of it this way. You're riding on the Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland. There's a couple of ships shooting cannons at each other, you hear pirates yelling orders at each other, and chaos from the town on the shore. You know, it's cool, it's neat. You drift through the town and you see the animatronics and you hear the music playing, and while it's definitely neat and you're drawn in like you're inside a diorama, suddenly you realize, oh hey, they're all doing the same things over and over. Now the immersion is gone, and instead of the magic of being transported to a pirate town under siege by 2 massive ships, all you see are really creepy mannequins. Quake IV in a nutshell, kids. Scripted events happen constantly. Strogg will leap out of the shadows and disappear as an attempt at cheap jump scares. Sometimes he'll crawl up the walls menacingly. One time, one of the massive walkers that you can only blow up while in a vehicle came through a tunnel I was standing in, and it caught me so off guard that I actually used up a lot of ammo shooting at it, but it turns out I didn't have to shoot at it. It was just there to walk by, kill one of my fellow offers in a scripted sequence, and then disappear. The second time I played through this, I didn't even bother shooting at it, and the result was the same. The walker came through, the Marines shot at it, one of them died, the walker moved on, scripted sequence over. The game also utilizes sequences that last for a very brief period of time that leave you wondering why the hell they had you interact with it. One example is when, after successfully capturing an anti-aircraft gun, Kane is tasked with taking over the controls and using the cannon to destroy a hangar door so the Marines can get inside. The game prompts you to get into a chair, which then loads a new screen so you control the cannon from first person, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that you'll have to use the cannon to fend off waves of Strogg. But no, you just have to fire the cannon once at the hangar doors, and then you're prompted to exit the chair. That's it. A whole lot of resources and coding and assets for what amounts to a 5-second segment that didn't need to be interactive. Raven really wanted this to feel like being inside of a movie. A giant alien sci-fi war movie where you are on the ground in the middle of it all. Once the strings behind the scenes are revealed, it is shocking just how much of this game is dependent on pre-programmed actions that you have no control over. For fuck's sake, there's a bit where you have to stand in a decontamination chamber that lasts 30 seconds. You're stuck in one room for 30 seconds with literally nothing to do.
Chamber at maximum saturation. Purging chamber. Decontamination cycle complete.
You're clean. Come on through.
Who greenlit this? Once we're through the first couple objectives, Kane evacs back to the main dropship, the Hannibal. There's a mission briefing about an EMP and 4 different convoys named after the 4 horsemen, but like, every time the story bits start playing, the dialogue is so generic and unspecific and routely delivered that I can't seem to pay attention to what they're actually saying. I'm literally typing this while watching footage, and I just watched the bit where they got their orders, and I don't remember what they said. Like, great, sure, we got orders and a war on, but there's way too much talking and explaining in this Quake game.
I only need to know one thing. Where they are.
You can explore the Hannibal, which is interesting, I guess. There's Marines you can interact with or listen in on. You have to navigate the ship to find the briefing room, and then navigate to find the armory, and then navigate to find the drop zone. And for some reason, this game is obsessed with giving Kane plenty of things to do where absolutely nothing is happening. There's also some heavy-handed foreshadowing if you hang around the medics who are talking about Strogg physiology and how painful it is for a human being to be Stroggified. We'll visit the Hannibal again later, and it'll be
What's a piece of shit Strogg doing on board the Hannibal?
different. Great, so after the briefing, we hop on the back of a convoy truck and...
Come on, Doyle, get us out of here! The guys are really cleaning up the flyers since you blew up the hangars, Kane. Cut the chatter, gentlemen, and keep your eyes wide. There's reports of Strogg in this area. The Strogg have got us locked pinned down! Come on!
Protecting the convoy means shooting Strogg from the back of the truck, so it's a theme park shooting gallery ride. Zoom forward, slow down as Strogg pop out like targets, and then zoom forward again. You'll eventually get off the truck, only to hop onto the back of another convoy truck, this one with a mounted machine gun that you'll use to destroy turrets and shit, so the rest of the convoy can move forward. And whose idea was it to turn Quake into a rail shooter? But soon we finally get...
I don't know nothing. I do my job and shut the hell up, just like you should.
Oh, thank God. Baby. Baby. Fuck me, I do love a good nail gun, and this is not a bad nail gun. The damage output is ridiculous and will fucking invalidate Strogg enemies, but the problems with handling it are twofold. Number one, there's a short windup on the barrel, so every time you try to fire it, you have a mild delay. A delay so mild that I constantly forgot about it and my timing was off whenever I used it. Second, the projectiles on this gun fire way too slowly for a nail gun. It's almost like you're firing mini rockets instead of nails. I did my best with it because Dad is a nail gun slut, and I really like the design of this one. Outside of the OG, this is probably my favorite nail gun. I mean, look at this. This is mean and nasty and ready to fuck. But the way it handles and the nature of the projectiles make it damn near impossible to really utilize to its full potential on higher difficulties. It's almost like Raven knew they had a devastating weapon on their hands and just nerfed it slightly enough to make it so you can't spam it to win the day. There's something later in the game that makes it kind of better, but we'll get there, kids. Oh, just you wait, we'll get there. But even that doesn't really help. Next up, Kane hops behind the wheel of a hover tank. It's fucking boring. We've got sluggish controls, flying enemies that are hard to hit, a cannon that constantly misses and needs to recharge, a pea-shooter machine gun that would do more damage if everything would just hold still, the introduction of a Strogg that launches homing missiles which cause an annoying red alert sound in the tank, and eventually the introduction of the Walker, which also launches homing missiles and isn't that intimidating, it's just annoying. This whole combat sequence is fucking baffling to me. Did they... I don't know, maybe they thought that because Halo had tanks and mounted turrets that Quake needed it too? So that explains why we're dropped into a goddamn Battlezone ripoff and forced to wade through this shit? Sliding around like you're on mud-soaked ice, lousy sound effects, uninspired gameplay, the absolute lack of any sense of speed or good gameplay? Okay, cool. We're back on the ground doing the marine thing, and I kind of forget how boring this game is for a few minutes because the aesthetics and the lighting are so well done that I was, well, actually impressed by it. It's very blue, very alien. You can see a lot of H.R. Giger influence here. I wouldn't be surprised if the production team on Prometheus played through this game first and drew some inspiration from it. I'm still really not that big a fan of id Tech 4 and how it was used, but scenes like this, little tiny things in the background with the colors and the lighting, really does highlight how powerful the engine could be in the right hands, being used for the right reasons. It's a damn shame we didn't get more shit like this throughout the game. Up till now, I haven't commented on the game's difficulty, but if it wasn't evident before this that Quake 4 is punishing, then the successive sequences of firefights we're about to get into is what's gonna do it for you. Having played through this now on two separate settings, the first time on Lieutenant, which is the second highest difficulty, and the second time on Corporal, which is one step down, I can confidently say that Lieutenant is way too difficult. There's a massive discrepancy in how much damage enemies do to Kane and how much damage they can sponge before they go down. Now, it's your dad's policy to play first-person shooters on the equivalent of ultra-violence, so I'm no stranger to playing through the hard way. I know I'm going in for a rough time, and I factor that in when I'm examining the difficulty, but Jesus fuck. Enemy reaction time and damage output is disgusting. Lieutenant doesn't feel like ultra-violence when compared to Corporal. It feels a lot closer to Nightmare. Some enemies will one-shot Kane with ease, others will drop him in 2 to 3 hits. Full health and armor mean jack fuck all, and before now, I definitely noticed that I'd get dropped quick if I didn't pay attention, but here the game goes full Chad. Enemies are just soaking up those nails. Shotgun blasts at close range make them laugh. Even grenades seem to only slow them down unless you can land a direct hit. I don't think I can stress enough just how on point you have to be compared to the Corporal difficulty. On Corporal, I found myself walking into rooms like a merchant of death, ready to make change, laying waste to everything in sight, and only dying because I got too cocky and didn't bother to check my health. On Lieutenant, I was scrambling for cover constantly, backing away from melee Strogg because they will fuck you up worse than anything, desperately trying to use my grenade launcher from a safe distance. There are some difficulty settings that feel challenging, and some that feel unfair. Quake 4's Lieutenant difficulty, especially compared to the Corporal setting, absolutely feels unfair, so I can't even fathom what the highest difficulty must be like. Kane picks up the Hyper Blaster here, which is definitely a boon, and is the best rapid-fire weapon in the game. It's been upgraded from his Quake II counterpart, and is fairly effective, more so than the rifle, but the downsides are that it shoots projectiles versus hit scan. So really the biggest difference between the rifle and the Hyper Blaster is whether or not you want a reliable, slightly weaker hit scan weapon, or a not as reliable, slightly stronger projectile weapon. Blah blah blah. Kane arrives at the Tetra node, which is a central hub for the Nexus we're trying to destroy, and oh no! Kane is ambushed by two massive spider strog things. Oh no, whatever will we do? Okay, while these things are actually kind of cool designs and even fun to fight, I want to take a second to point out how the game loves to back out of Kane's perspective and go third person for a moment to show the player an enemy we're facing for the first time, rather than have the player run face first into them and strategize on the fly. It feels a lot like hand-holding. This is indicative of a larger problem of the game in that Quake IV spends so much time guiding players to pay attention to certain things, or to notice certain things. Whenever the game doesn't do that, it can make it so that there's no clear indicator of what to actually do next.
There's a large life form in your vicinity. You must get out of there quickly. Kane! It can't be! It's the micro! Get out of there, Kane! Get out!
Yeah, just out of nowhere, here comes the final boss of Quake II, resurrected somehow in a bigger, sleeker, creepier body, and now we have to fight him. So, nail guns out, boys, let's get that. Oh shit. And now we've come to the Big Daddy sequence that everyone and their younger brother talked about once they hit this point in the game. Kane gets strogified. It's an admirable moment, and it's really stretched out for dramatic impact, but I gotta admit that as much as I was hoping to feel horrified or even a little squeamish like you do when you're watching a gory Saw movie kill or something, I was just kind of bored. It's certainly well staged. The atmosphere and the aesthetics are well done, but this whole sequence just screams amusement park ride. You can't move other than turn your head to look around. Kane repeats the same movement cycle as he wriggles indifferently on the track. The strog hanging around in the background are set to idle animations, and I really wanted this to feel like it was having an impact on me, but everything just feels like it's a Knott's Berry Farm haunted maze situation, where you're walking through and the actors keep jumping out at you, but they're not allowed to touch you, so it feels both hard and limp at the exact same time. Kane doesn't even sound like he's in that much pain when his legs get cut off. I don't know, in 2005 this must have slapped, but viewing it in 2021 it's very clear just how much this game is going for a feel, you know? Like they're trying real hard to be a cinematic body horror sci-fi action flick. And before this part, the game had been flirting with some body horror stuff, but from this point onward, it goes really hard into the body horror aspect. I mean, really hard. Kane is saved from full strogification by his squad, who are assured that the implant in his head hasn't been turned on yet, and can't be turned on from this point on, so he's definitely not ever going to turn on them. So they let him out and put a shotgun in his hands, and we're back on the trail of hunting strogs, and yikes. I mean, we briefly seen Kane before this, and he was, you know, fairly milquetoast and bland marine looking, so this is definitely an upgrade in terms of unique character presentation, but damn. Alright, so the immediate benefits to this is that the once slow as molasses Kane now runs at a decidedly much quicker clip, which is just, chef's kiss. And also, there have been these weird flesh things on the walls throughout the game so far that I haven't been able to interact with. Now that Kane is stroggish though, guess what? It turns out they're full of stroyant, some kind of slurpy organic material that heals strog, which makes them strog health stations, and now you're gonna find them all over the place. Thanks, Half-Life! So not only can Kane move faster, but he can also heal off of these things. Two wonderful, wonderful benefits to being chopped up and metallicized, you know what I'm saying? On top of that, there are display screens throughout the game that Kane can now read since he's been strogged, which is a neat touch, and the HUD has been changed to match the strog font. One of the things that bugged me about this, though, was the fact that the letter E has been replaced by the number 3, which might have made sense on a weird binary mechanical level, and maybe even early 2000s edgy cool, but it makes my eyes and my brain hurt. Kane can also now hear what I think are general transmissions to the strog in the area, warning about intruders searching the base, meaning we occasionally get warnings about incoming ambushes. It's a nice touch. But yeah, imagine having to explain this turn of events to your loved ones. I left Earth a man and came back a machine. You know, I can just see it, you know? Kane sitting down on the Hannibal, composing a letter to his mother to break it to her, like he was in a Ken Burns documentary.
Dearest mother, a wise man once said that war never changes, but as it it turns out, a man can change. I was captured behind enemy lines and taken to a strogification facility where most of my body was brutally mutilated and replaced with cybernetic components. Fortunately, my personality remains intact, so I am not a soulless automaton. However, it does pain me to admit that I can no longer indulge in human foods and can subsist solely on stroyan to maintain my organic aspects. So the pineapple upside-down cake you sent along with your last transmission was enjoyed by my squad mates instead of myself. Take heart, as there are currently many operational upsides to my new state of being and very few downsides, except for how I can hear the Strogg speaking. Their voices are constant, continual. I can't turn them off. When I kill them, they scream in frequencies only I can hear. They beg me in digital form, streaming to my nervous system how it feels to be torn apart by dark matter it won't stop. I hear them all the time. They will not stop speaking. They will not stop! Also, Lieutenant Voss would love some more pineapple cake. No, I am still the same man you raised, and nothing will ever change that. Your ever-loving son. 01011010011001100110011001101. Kane. P.S. Weird how so many of the guys here sound the same.
Pretty soon after this, we get the rocket launcher, which is one of the few weapons I have zero qualms with in this game, aside from the blast radius being absolutely absurd. The rocket launcher does good damage, has a decent fire rate even before it gets upgraded, and it auto-reloads rockets so you can blast to your heart's content until it racks in another rocket and you're good to go. It's good. There's some thought that's been put into it, and it makes it stand apart from other Quake rocket launchers. Hell, other rocket launchers in the FPS genre. I really like its design too, with the open space on the top so we can see the rockets load. Holy shit, I actually really like this weapon. This is a good, fine, commendable rocket launcher. Okay, so there's this neat little bit of foreshadowing as we're going through the medical facility where we keep seeing these orange armored Strogg in glass containers being transported around. At first, it doesn't really seem like anything big, like more background imagery of the Strogg factory, but they conspicuously have the same armor and color that Kane has. We then see...
Damn, Kane, it's good to see you. I knew you could handle yourself in tough situations, but you've really gone above and beyond. When we heard you and Strauss were missing at the hub, we assumed you'd been killed. It's sheer luck we found you in the medical labs. Don't worry, we'll get you back to the...
And now we've been introduced to the tactical Strogg. We get to fight them a little later on, but the tactical Strogg are what Kane was going to be fully turned into, calculating soldier drones who move in squads and communicate with each other to try and flank you. They usually carry machine guns and shotguns, but sometimes also railguns, which is unfortunate because they have really good aim. So no matter what they're packing, they can and will fuck your shit up faster than you can say sweet cup and cakes. Oh gee, are you gonna pop out at me once I'm out of this crawl space? Yep, I dubbed these assholes teleporter dogs because they're dogs and they drop teleporter beacons that warp in Strogg enemies. The quicker you kill the dog, the fewer enemies you'll have to deal with. Fail to do so and you'll have a room full of Strogg in no time flat coming down on you like angry stepdads. Not fun, not great. Okay, so remember how I said that Quake IV holds your hand so much that when it needs you to do something but expects you to figure it out on your own, it feels incredibly obtuse? Yeah, this is the part where that became very obvious to me. So the point of this section is you need to climb into the mech suit and head over to the next area. Hooray, it's exactly like the tank section, except clunkier and slower. Hooray. But the objectives don't tell you to get into the walker, nor does anyone on the radio tell you to get into the walker. You have to walk directly up to it, face it, and there's a prompt telling you to get in. But when the map loaded, I walked right past it without a clue, like right past it, like right up next to it even, and spent a good 10-15 minutes trying to figure out where to go because there's this green poison cloud preventing you from moving onward, and you can't go over or around or through it without dying. So I was stuck, genuinely stuck, until I made a happenstance investigation of the walker suit and it says, get in. Oh, you motherfucker. I must have passed by that damn thing 2 or 3 times, close enough that there should have been a prompt. but there was no prompt because I had to be facing it in the exact right spot to know that it was a vehicle I could enter. And since I didn't know I was supposed to get into it because so far the game had been telling me literally everything I needed to do, it took me way too long to figure that out. Anyways, this section is bullshit and slow and not fun. Speaking of slow and not fun, we get the railgun here. I'm sorry, did that just take 2 shots from the railgun to kill that motherfucker? I just killed a bunch of those guys with only a couple rockets. If I can take something out with fewer rockets than railgun shots, then you have done the railgun wrong. Seriously, the railgun in this game is impeccably nerfed. It also just doesn't feel very satisfying to use. In previous Quake games, you get the sensation that when a rail slug hits, it hits. The stopping power of the railgun ought to be second to none, but here the slugs seem to whiff by or through enemies without doing very much damage at all. It doesn't hit as hard, it doesn't hit as often, and it's really only useful on larger enemies who don't move as quickly. But those enemies are going to tank a lot of damage, so you're just using up slugs that fire slowly and don't do as much damage as other weapons that fire faster. This is just fucking disappointing.
Help me! I'm down here! Hey, you're Matthew Kane.
How the fuck can you even tell that, buddy? Yeah, it's a good thing the Strog left Kane's face intact because it comes in real handy when you meet up with other Marines who haven't heard that you've been Strogified and by rights ought to just open fire on you on sight. Okay, here's something I haven't talked about with the weapons yet because it hasn't really been a thing, but this tech here offers to upgrade your nail gun after rescuing him, and he adds a scope mod which lets you lock onto Strog, and your nails will home in on them once locked, which is neat, but where the fuck was this option when I got the fucking gun, and why the fuck does this tech that I just rescued from being turned into meat sauce have the equipment to add this mod right here and now? At various points, Kane encounters different tech specialists who will say something like, oh hey, I just happen to specialize in Strog tech, or oh hey, I just happen to have a mod for one of your weapons, and they'll proceed to add a mod or something cool to one of your guns, and sure, fine, give me weapon upgrades, but the way the game executes this idea is so ham-fisted and forced. Like, how on earth are these random Marines just able to deftly and quickly add mods or ammo extensions to your weapons, especially alien weapons, in the middle of a combat situation? It feels so oddly done, especially in a Quake game. Just give me cool guns that do cool things when you give them to me. I just fucking hate having to deal with a weapon that only kind of does decent damage until a forced upgrade later on makes it viable. There are ways to make an upgrade path work really well, like Doom Eternal, but that's a whole specialization and RPG upgrade process. Quake 4 just goes, oh shit, you could use a scope on your railgun, huh? And then hands it over randomly like, motherfucker. The lightning gun makes an appearance, which is fine. It's fine. Just like most weapons in this game, it's fine. Doesn't seem to do more or less damage than, say, the Hyper Blaster or the machine gun, but it does shock some enemies into place, so they stun lock, but otherwise it's just fine. It works fine. It's just fine. At this point in the game, I'm so disappointed by weapons and concepts carried over from previous Quake entries that I'm actively fighting against myself as well as the game. Raven is a talented pool of developers who know how to make good games. Even when their games are mediocre, they still make good games that are good to play. But despite the clear amount of aesthetic value and polish and talent behind the scenes of this game, it just doesn't feel fun to play. Pressing onward, I'm hoping, praying for something that feels fun and not a struggle. But every firefight is filled with enemies that can two-shot me if I'm not careful about cover or systematic combat. This Quake is not a run-and-gun shooter where you note enemy animations or tells. You're just fighting for your fucking life at each turn, popping out of cover to pop off a shot or two, hoping against hope that you're doing some kind of damage as the game continuously throws more and more damage sponge enemies at you. Did I mention that fall damage is a little ridiculous? What in the BDSM is this shit? We have to run through the waste processing facility where we meet up with zombies. And not just zombies, but acid vomiting, shotgun wielding, low to the floor, crawling zombies.
There are freaking zombies down here. I just killed one, but it bit me. Shit, I need a medic. These aren't zombies, they're partially Strogified Marines.
I don't care what you're trying to call them, game. They're fucking zombies and they are everywhere here. This is the only place in the game where they show up. Thank God. And you might underestimate them at first because of how easily they go down, but if you don't take them out quick, there's that thing with the acid vomit that I mentioned, which hurts real bad and will end your day right quick. Also, some of them fall apart when you think you've killed them, so their upper bodies will come crawling along towards you if you're not paying attention, and that's just lovely. How did that miss? How the fuck did that miss?
Hey, it's that Kane guy.
How do you know that?
I analyzed the scanning circuits. All they're looking for is proper Strogg ID codes.
Wouldn't Kane have those codes? He looks pretty Strogg to me.
Yeah, I bet they do.
How about it, Kane? You want to try walking through? It should read you as Strogg.
Well, isn't that a nice little bonus to me not being entirely human anymore? Aren't you glad to take advantage of that?
Kane! You have to get out of here! I don't know how much longer I can last!
Oh shit, that's Lieutenant Voss! Oh, and he hits hard. This is the first boss fight in the game, and it's a doozy. First off, you need to whittle down Voss's shield so you can chip away at his actual health. Take down enough health, and he marches over to a new conduit and replenishes his shields, and we rinse and repeat. Meanwhile, fodder Strogg keep teleporting in to give you a hard time. I was already low health with few pickups to find along the way, even though there are some in this arena to run around and pick up. But Voss has two weapons that make running away difficult. A dark matter weapon, which leeches health away from you if you're anywhere near the blast, and homing rockets that can and will follow you around corners. So it's a dirty, dirty dance of running around corners, popping out of cover to take some pot shots with the rocket launcher or the grenade launcher, and whenever possible, hammer down the hyper blaster and nail gun to clean him out of health. But there's a lot happening all at the same time. Perseverance and determination will win the day, but holy fucking shit. Right before the fight, one of the techs will upgrade your rocket launcher so it will auto-load 3 rockets instead of 1 at a time. Now you can let rip 3 rockets in rapid succession before the launcher starts reloading, and even then you can still keep launching single fire as it loads them. There's also the alt fire mod, which you can use to paint a target, meaning fire your rockets, then hold right mouse onto the target of your choosing, and the rockets will home in on it, which is great in larger, wider open areas, but here in this mess, there isn't time to stand around and wait for the rockets to slowly turn around and find the poor soul you're leading them to. I guess no more pineapple upside down cake for Voss. After this, Kane and the rest of the Marines make it back to the Hannibal.
Welcome back, Corporal Kane. May I be the first to say you look like shit, son?
Ha! Okay, alright, that was clever. I liked that. Alright, walking around the Hannibal now versus earlier is a night and day experience, which really doesn't vibe with what the game's trying to go for. See, before, when we were running around in combat, we kept encountering Marines who would take one look at us and go, oh, hey, fuck, it's Kane. Hey, Matthew Kane, you absolute mad lad. Let's go shoot some stuff. Yet here now on the Hannibal, walking amongst all of the soldiers you've been serving with, Kane is now being treated like some dirty Strogg, and the soldiers either turn up their noses at him or go into defensive mode because he looks like a fucking Strogg. And that's neat. That's a neat take. Like, oh hey, this shitty thing outside your control happened to you, and now you're a Strogg, but you're still kinda human, and now all your friends don't trust you anymore. Except that literally every soldier on the ground has been super welcoming and glad to see you, and the upper brass in the meeting are like, hell yes, we're gonna take advantage of this. So you literally only meet up with like 5 people who don't trust you and vocalize that. So sure, fine, I guess. The Hannibal is under attack and we need to drop for our final mission, which means making our way through the ship and picking up a shotgun mod, which...
I guess even you get one of these. It's a shotgun that's been modified. Can't kill the ones on the flyers, they're coming too low!
What was that? Everyone's talking at the same time. What did you...
It's a shotgun that's been modified. Can't kill the ones...
What? Oh, my shotgun can hold more ammo now. That's great. That's actually very kind of you. Kane gets into a drop pod. We have an extended cutscene where we can't control anything again, and we're boots on the ground, so it's off to getting shit done one more time. Alright, now we need to find a way to... Excuse me, what was that? What was that? They modded a shotgun with a magazine? A fucking magazine? God and the man Jesus, it wasn't enough that Quake II had that weird drum-fed shotgun and the pump-action double barrel. Now we have a shotgun with a clip. God fucking Jesus, fuck the fucking blasphemy of this action. No. Alright, I can get back into this. Okay. It's final assault time, so we're going to be moving through a lot of levels that are getting beat the fuck up by a rain of destruction from outside, which adds a genuine sense of tension moving forward. The idea that we're in the thick of it and trying to get through to shutting down the Strogg War for good was what the game needed at this point. Speaking of things the game needed, Kane comes across the final weapon in the game, the most powerful energy weapon known to the Marines. It's the BFG... Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, it's the dark matter gun. The dark matter gun operates almost exactly the same way as a BFG, except for the key factor factor being that it isn't nearly as useful or destructive. It fires a large purple ball of energy which sucks in lower tier enemies into it as it passes by, and when the ball collides with something solid, like a wall, it does a big shockwave of damage. The problem with this is that it doesn't explode on contact with enemies, even large enemies, so you can't take advantage of the big explosion unless there's something solid behind or beside it. It's like, you know, it's fine, it works in certain situations, but for the simple purpose of just blowing the ever-loving oblivion out of something, it doesn't cut the mustard. God, I can't even have a BFG in this fucking game. The Iron Maidens are back from Quake II, kids, and this time they're no longer just weirdly sexual versions of the tanks. Now they're ethereal, floaty witch things that lob mini rockets at you from a distance, or swipe with their big hook hands when you get up close. Sometimes they'll be floating around already, but for the most part, you have to pass by their little stasis pods in order for them to activate and seek your ass out. If you don't kill them quick enough, they'll teleport away and attempt to teleport behind you. They're pretty cool. They switch up combat and aren't the worst damage sponges in the game. I like them. Although Raven couldn't help but put a titty window on their stasis pods. Yeah, that's a titty window. So, alright, the next couple of segments involve activating 3 security towers in order to unlock a central command node, which we can then use to access the Nexus, which is basically the Strogg hive mind, which when killed will effectively neuter the Strogg and the war will be over. You get that? Got that? Okay, cool. Let's kill some shit. Now, that's all well and good, but these areas here leading up into the endgame are way too similar across the board to be interesting. First off, each of the 3 sections involves finding elevators that lead way up high to a rooftop antenna, and each antenna is guarded by a brief fight on said rooftop, and each rooftop has the exact same fucking layout. Everything here is starting to slowly blur together, where in the first half of the game, there's set pieces and environments that change up to enough to a degree where it sticks in my head and I can recall bits of it. Here it's just kind of muddy and messy with too many similarities between the towers to feel like there's anything distinct going on. We've got hallways, ambushes, repairing a tram, another fucking rail shooter experience where you man another turret and shoot at things. The second of the 3 towers introduces teleportation nodes that spawn in Strogg enemies for a set number of waves before they stop coming through, but then there's a bit where the teleports don't actually stop transporting tactical Strogg into the arena. It starts off with you calling a lift down to take you up to the tower roof, but 3 spider Stroggs show up to give you a bad day, all while multiple tactical Strogg keep teleporting in from one spot in the room. So I thought that like in other situations in the game, I would have to contain the threat spawning in constantly until they stopped spawning in, which would allow me to then move onwards and take the lift up to the rooftop. But no, you just have to wait until the lift door turns from red to green and then duck out of the fight, which I wouldn't have known if I hadn't seen my marine buddy run to the lift and get in. I would have just kept trying to kill shit until they stopped coming. Once we reach the second rooftop with the exact same layout as the one before, we get to fight these motherfuckers. We met them before in the vehicle segments. They float around and fire homing rockets. Big heavy-duty homing rockets that can and will bounce you around from the splash damage. If you're far enough away from an incoming rocket, try to shoot it out of the air before it lands anywhere near you, because it will cause significant damage to your health no matter where it lands. These fucks could take a lot of damage in the vehicle sections, so imagine how much damage they can soak up from your regular weapons. Okay, 2 towers down, 1 tower left to go. Taking the elevator down gives us a sneak peek at the next boss, which we heard yelling and screaming in the previous tower but didn't get to see. It's huge and pissed and destroys the elevator we're on, so we're probably gonna have to find another way around to get to the tram. No, it's right here, we're good. That was another 2-minute sequence that didn't involve any interaction on our part. Okay, more elevators going up, more ambushes involving teleporters. More elevators going up, more ambushes involving teleporters. At least in this tower, we've got multiple NPCs with us to make the slog move along a little bit quicker. You'd have to really screw up to die during all this. Son of a bitch. Okay, that was just fucking uncool, my dude. I'm riding at 10 health for a lot of this, slowly making my way upwards through safe scumming. The guardian creature hanging outside is tearing the tower apart, presumably looking for Kane to try and stop him at the rooftop. This is a bullshit fight. So the guardian has a rocket pack that lets it fly upwards into the air. That means you're doing a lot of aiming upwards as it buzzes around. Sometimes it hovers directly overhead to burn you with the flames from its jetpack. It's also got mini rockets and homing rockets and is disgustingly tough. Meanwhile, as you're running around on the rooftop between cover, there are Strogg flyers carpet bombing the roof to keep you on your toes. I had 2, maybe 3 deaths out of the multiple deaths during this fight in which I got bounced off of the roof due to explosions tumbling me through the air like an unwanted ragdoll. I even had 1 death where I actually killed homeboy, but then a dive bombing flyer took me out immediately after. Once the guardian is down and the final antenna is in place, Kane gets to teleport directly to the Nexus core. Nexus core does switch up the scenery a little bit after the sameness of the 3 tower sections in what is essentially one long corridor crawl to break into the core and destroy destroy it. Lots of tactical Strogg, lots of Iron Maidens, lots of rail cannon Strogg, lots of teleporters. Oh man. And then comes the Gauntlet. A long room with pylons and cover to hide behind, and groups of tanks, floating cannon bastards, and spider Strogg. Just like 5 or 6 waves of damage sponge enemies that do a fuck ton of damage on you. The floating cannon fucks being the worst with their huge homing rockets and wide blast radius. This is a game of grind and survive, because at first the tanks are going to demand a shit ton of ammo to go down. Your best bet is the shotgun, which will stun them momentarily here and there, plus you can reliably chip away at their health. But then the cannon fucks, there's no good strategy to take them down. You can't spend too much time in their direct line of sight or they fire mini rockets, and you can't stay too far away from them or they'll launch their homing rockets. And you can't reliably use cover against the homing rockets because the splash damage will go through the pylon and send you flying for damage. This is just, there's no good way to play this room outside of popping out of cover whenever you can and holding down the fire button and praying and grinding and save scumming. There are 2 more narrow corridors to slog through before we finally get to the big daddy himself, the Macron. Considering our unfinished business with this bastard, I'm going in loud with the dark matter gun, which I've got plenty of ammo for now since I barely used it on anything that wasn't bigger than me. Here is one of the few times where the dark matter actually does the job exactly the way you want it to. Absolutely shredding the Macron's health. Phase 1 of the boss fight is pretty straightforward and fine. Macron tries to hit you with dark matter energy and rockets. You dodge away and shoot back. A stand-up fight like I was hoping for. But Phase 2 is where this shit gets really stupid. So these 4 pylons feed the Macron with dark energy. He separates from his body just like he did at the end of Quake II, but now on top of having to deal with the Macron, there are teleporters at the 4 corners of the room that have activated, and fodder Strogg are slowly starting to warp in. Take the Macron's health down far enough and it'll attempt to recharge at one of the pylons to gain it back, so you gotta stay on top of whittling his health down, which I did through a combination of the dark matter gun and rockets in between dark matter blasts. Problem now that he's floating around is that his weaponry switches up a little bit. So in addition to blasting you with dark matter, he's also got an energy cannon whose shots bounce off surfaces if they don't hit you, meaning that taking cover behind the pylons isn't gonna do jack dig diddly because the shots will reflect off the wall behind you and chew your health to pieces. The shots also spread out in 3s, so if you try to strafe around the room while targeting the Macron, you're likely leading yourself right into the path of the blasts rather than away from them. If you stay sharp and stay tactical, popping out of cover every now and again to lob off a dark matter shot, you'll get through okay and maybe have enough health to survive the opening 30 seconds of the next phase, the Nexus. I want to state right here that this game is not punishing by design. If anything, the design of the game is fairly straightforward, not especially brutal or cunning or challenging by nature. In fact, most of the design is very safe, very bland, very cinematic versus interactive, and overall doesn't present anything outside of a standard military shooter from the mid-2000s. No, the scope of this difficulty is in the way the numbers work. It lies in how much damage you do and how much damage you take on the individual difficulty settings. From what I recall as I played through this, there were no fewer or more enemies that I had to face in Lieutenant versus Corporal. It's all just damage based. So the Nexus fight opens and I see a health bar with a shield meter. I think, okay, I have to take down the Nexus shields and then I can take down its health. Sure, great, but shooting at the Nexus doesn't take away from the shield meter. Nothing I fire at it does. Up until now, whenever I faced an enemy with shields, I could deplete the shields by shooting at the enemy and then the shield would regenerate over time. So this is a first. I'm being ambushed from all sides by legions of Strogg. So now I'm thinking I gotta outwit, outlast, outplay these motherfuckers until the shields go down or something pops up that'll let me take the shields down so I can pummel the Nexus, which leads to half an hour of continually grinding, dying over and over and over and quick saving every couple of minutes so I don't lose any progress I may have somehow gained. There's nodes up above the Nexus which I try shooting to no avail. There's no buttons on either floor of the arena that I can reach which would turn off the shields. I'm just wasting ammo keeping Strogg off my ass, unable to figure out what the fuck to do. It's a marathon of pain and hatred, and eventually I decide, you know what? Fuck this. I have had my ass handed to me one too many times today. I'm gonna go look up a walkthrough. Here. This, right here, this tiny little conduit above the Nexus is what I have to shoot to take down the fucking shields. Apparently I'm supposed to shoot that, then shoot the Nexus until the shields are repaired, and then I need to take the shields down again, and then shoot at it some more. Fine. Okay. Fucking fine. I had no fucking prompt or clue or idea of how to take the shields down, and what with half the goddamn Strogg army coming down on my ball sack, I wasn't exactly in the position to do too much experimentation. And that's a tiny fucking target too. Definitely not something that was in my range of sight at first. Not without taking the time to look, and fuck, you know what? Fuck it. Ending cutscene, Kane is a hero, the Strogg are dead, Kane now has new orders, Macron laughs in the background, cliffhanger ending, oh my god, will we get more? End credits, and I'm out. Quake IV is a product of its time, which makes it no better, no worse than really any shooter. But shooters in 2005 were made a certain way, leaning on that cinematic flair, scripted sequences, highlighting more what new technology could do as far as immersion was concerned versus whether or not the games themselves were entertaining to play. At its core, it's a competently made shooter that takes no risks, brings nothing new to the table, and without the inclusion of the Stroggification scene would be pretty forgettable. Which is the problem here with Quake IV. This is a military shooter with vehicle combat and rail shooter segments and slow, methodical combat. None of that is Quake in spirit. Quake IV is only a Quake game because Raven picked up the threads from the end of Quake II to continue that story and the universe. But I can't accept it as a Quake game. Even as a military shooter, is it even a good game? Well, the combat feels fine at least. The weapons range from okay to pretty neat, and depending on the difficulty, will hit hard and get the job done. It's hard not to praise the graphics, even though most of the art direction plays it super safe with samey mechanical environments stretched between moments of interesting visuals. The vehicle and rail shooter bits are bullshit and have zero place in this game. The only thing they serve to do is slow the pacing way down and just aren't that fun to play. The story is by the book, the soundtrack, what little there is by the book, although the main theme by Chris Brenna and Clint Walsh is pretty good. If anything, it feels like Raven phoned it in, painting by numbers with basic bitch gameplay and combat, hoping the graphics and the visual splendor and scripted cinematic sequences would awe players enough to ignore how mediocre it is overall. And yet, for some reason, I can't help being drawn to it. It's the kind of game you play, and by the end, you feel like you missed something. Like there's some magical moment or aha aspect of it that would fall into place, and you would suddenly actually really love this game and understand what it was going for and why it gets so much love. After having played through it twice in the last 3 weeks, I still feel like there's something I'm just missing. I know that there are plenty of people who just don't like this game, and that there's also quite a few people who do genuinely love it. In writing this script, I read up on Alien Resurrection for the comparison, and it seems there are a bunch of people who actually love that movie nowadays. It was savaged when it came out, but now there's strangely a bunch of people who really do enjoy it. Maybe it's the passage of time and hindsight combined with audiences who were younger when it came out, now being adults and having a more favorable perspective due to when they saw the flick. Originally, no one could accept it as an entry into the Alien saga. These days, despite how different and strange it might be compared to the first 3 Alien flicks, it's found its audience. Quake IV might be in the same camp. Somehow it has survived time and criticism to be a well-received entry in a franchise that it really doesn't fucking belong in. But it's the direct sequel to Quake II, so it must be good, right? Maybe. What does seem to be the case is that while Quake IV might not feel like a Quake game at its core, it is a numbered entry in the franchise, which, despite all evidence to the contrary, does mean that it is, in fact, a Quake game. Is that something I can accept? Fuck if I know. What I do know, or rather believe, is this. Matthew Kane deserves some respect. That man went through some shit and got used by the army after getting his shit wrecked and nearly being turned into a full robot, and he destroyed the Nexus and the Strogg as far as we know. His design is honestly pretty cool, with the orange armor and face looking the way it does. Man went through some shit, and it would be really neat to see him get his due in like Quake Champions or something like that. Quake IV is technically proficient, playable, and passable. It's not very fun in a lot of places, despite being very pretty, and its arsenal wavers between good and merely okay. What Quake IV is not is forgettable. Oh yeah, plenty of this game will blur together in the back half, with the 3 towers being almost copy-pasted left and right, but you will not forget how much it pisses you off, how much it bores you, and how much you just want it to be plain better than it is. For that, with that, it is stuck in my head, and I want to come back and find that magic spot which makes it better. Just like Alien Resurrection, I find myself fascinated with where it went wrong. I don't hate this game necessarily. It's a different kind of Quake game. It does weird shit that doesn't work most of the time, but it's different and weird. And I like where it was trying to go, but I don't like how it did it. So I'll spend a lot more time analyzing the game for where it went wrong, rather than outright hating on it. As a game, Quake IV gets a score of 5.5. As an experience, Quake IV cannot be quantified. It is simply a machine. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop. 16 years now, it has haunted me. 16 years, and while at first I felt like I had finally taken the offensive and beaten it, now I sit here typing this script, realizing that this game can't be beaten. I may have finished it, but I didn't beat it. It lives in my head now. It occupies a space that I cannot evict it from. The more I try to fight it, the more it digs in. I tried to resist it, but here I am now. One with the machine, one with the game.
I understand now. I understand what it does. But only now too late. Too late to escape. There is no escape. There is only acceptance.